Hey y'all, it's Laura and I'm back with a Cocoa Vanilla Studio layout using the new Storyteller collection. Now we were challenged this month to create a layout that has a story to it, so some sort of story element following the theme of this collection. Now there's several different ways you could go with this. Let me give you some options. You could scrapbook your favorite book. You could scrapbook your favorite story that someone told you or that you remember from your memory. You could scrapbook a page that requires a lot of journaling. So you're telling the story, and that's what I'm going to do here. You could use your title as your journaling. So have a really long title instead. I like to do that pretty often as well. So lots of ways you can play with this theme and make it work for you. Now, these photos are from my husband's camping trip, one of his many camping trips with the kids. He loved to camp, and that is exactly what this layout is about. It's just talking about how much he enjoyed camping, how restorative he found it to be for him personally, and how much he enjoyed spending time out in nature with the kids. And so that was his number one hobby. He had a couple, but nothing was quite as important to him as camping. And as an avid scout leader and an Eagle Scout, just being out in nature was extremely restorative for him. He just felt like it reset his internal clock and helped him relieve a lot of stress and anxiety just going out into nature, just being outside. And my kids had varying degrees of interest in camping. Some more than others enjoyed camping, but they did get to experience a lot of learning how to care for themselves in the woods, learning about nature, how to preserve nature, how to treat nature with respect. And those are things that we felt were really important for our kids to learn as children. And so the scouting program was great for that. It was excellent for that, helping them to understand and appreciate the outdoors. And to some extent, not to fear it, but to respect it. Because wild animals, this is their home, and you should respect that this is their home. Not leaving trash out, things like that. The Boy Scout theory on this is to leave it in a better position than you found it. So if you find trash, pick it up, throw it away for somebody else. And that is just a great motto, I think, for being in nature for anyone, is to leave it a little better than you found it. And I think that that's a great lesson to teach kids. It's something that I think is important for them to know, that it is our responsibility to care for nature. That it is not the responsibility of some unnamed park ranger to go pick up all of the trash. No, if we create trash, we should clean up the trash. If we see trash that other people have left, we should help clean up the trash. And that was something that my husband was very passionate about and made a point with my kids to encourage them to not only clean up after themselves, but others. And I really wanted to do a little homage to his love of camping on this layout and just talk about it a little bit, talk about those things, about how he found it so restorative, how it was just like a balm to his soul to be out in the woods. He especially loved hiking. Yes, it was a lot of work. Yes, it was really hard. Yes, it burns a lot of calories. And in the moment, it may not feel like this is a lot of fun, but I know that every time he came back from those hiking trips, he was just a calmer, relieved person. That stress that builds up from working full time, from being the sole provider of our family, being out in the woods just really helped him reconnect with himself. And I think that that's something that I want to kind of point out to my kids, kind of honor about him. And so that's what I'm doing with this layout. Now, I had this little piece of a frame that was left over from a previous layout. I had cut a frame in half, and I really wanted to use it right here behind the photo, but it just didn't look quite right. And so what I end up doing is turning it into photo corners. Now, this is a great way to use up any sort of rectangular shape, whether it's a frame, whether it's honestly just strips of paper that you have cut into a certain shape. You can cut them into photo corners. So it's really, really easy, right? You just trim off how much you need, cut it at an angle with the longer edge on the outside, shorter edge on the inside, and then bam, you have photo corners. Now, I don't end up using them this way. I was going to, and I thought it looked kind of cool, but as I was looking at it, I was thinking, I kind of wish I had 4 photo corners. And because I don't, I decided to get creative. Let's see how else I can use these photo corners. I'm trying them on the outside of these photos, and that was okay, but I really would have wanted, again, 4 of them. And I didn't have that. So I went ahead and tried here on the edge, and I'm not sure what even prompted me to try that, but I liked it. I was like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. It gives the effect of some chevrons behind the edges of my photos, and I just thought it was really neat. So I decided to go ahead and leave them there and bring in my title. So we do have some beautiful foam words in this collection. And one of the things I love about this collection and about most of Cocoa Vanilla's collections is that these words often come with like little foam hearts or stars or just circles. And I love that because you can add those pieces around the page to match your title. So you can bring in the color of your title to your clusters or just to other places on the page. And I really, really like that effect. I think that it makes meshing together the color, because even though this is a simple black title, the shades of black can be different. Right? You can have some paper that is black, but it's a different shade than your title. And it's kind of nice to have some bits and pieces to incorporate into your clusters that have that same shade. So that's really nice. Now, dumping out the ephemera pack, I am going to dig through it and come up with some clusters. I didn't really have a plan for this layout. It was just a bit of fun. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed putting it together, and I was trying not to go too floral at first because it is my husband and my youngest son. And so initially I was thinking, okay, let's try to use some of the not so floral pieces first and then see if we need to dig into the florals. As it turns out, yes, we do need to dig into the florals because I'm just a floral person and my go-to embellishment are florals. But I kind of logicked myself into thinking that was all right because these are outdoor photos, and what's more outdoor than florals? Trees? I don't know. I didn't have any trees. So we went with florals, but I am going to bring in some of these little word phrases. I put one underneath of the title, which is kind of a nice little secondary title. And then I'll add a word phrase on either side of the larger photo. So the size of these photos, this is one 4x4 photo and 2 3x3 photos. And I printed those 3x3 photos as 3x4s and then trimmed them down. So that's a little trick if you would like to have square photos, is you can just print them as a larger 4x6 and cut them down to a 4x4, or you can print them as 3x4s and cut them down to 3x3s. And that worked out really well for these photos. That won't work for every photo, but it did work really well for these ones. And I really like square photos. I enjoy them quite a lot, actually. Which makes sense, because if you look at the shape of my background, it is square. And so it makes sense that square photos would work really well on a square background. Whereas when I'm scrapbooking in 9x12 or in Traveler's Notebook size, I actually prefer rectangular photos because I'm scrapping on a rectangular surface and my brain just likes the way those look together. So I thought I would try it with these photos. I do really like it. It came out cute. I'm going to create a cluster on either side of the title, just tucked underneath of my smaller photos. I initially tried on the right side here with the secondary photo, but didn't love how it looked. It felt a little lost off to the right side, a little disconnected from the rest of the layout. So I do end up moving it over, and they just sit a very subtle mix of embellishments on the left and the right directly next to the title. And here's the point at which I realized, you know what, I really wanted something up here at the top. It needed softening. This is a very linear layout. You'll notice that a lot of my layouts start out linear. I find structure very comforting in my design and very easy to work with. And so what I will often do is start with a linear design and then soften it as much as possible. Some of the ways you can soften the linear lines of your layout is to add circular items or rounded items, things like florals, things like hearts, things like circles and ovals. All of those bits and pieces will work to soften a linear look. Underneath of these two smaller photos, I have put 2 half circles. That helps to soften the look of those hard, sharp corners right there. And then I'm building my little clusters on top of that. So this layout actually has technically 4 clusters, so there's no rule of 3 happening here, and that's okay. You don't have to go with odd numbers. It's just a bit more interesting to the eye when you do have odd numbers. In this case, though, I have a lovely little effect with my title that gives the appearance of a 5th element on the page. So even though there are only 4 clusters, my title is pretty strong, and so it stands on its own as its own element. And so we have 4 clusters plus a large title, and you have 5. And that's how you can kind of get around the 3 clusters only or 5 clusters only by having a nice strong title to take up that space. Now, I definitely wanted to include plenty of words on this page. Again, telling a story is the theme we're working with. And so I have some word phrases on 2 of my clusters there at the bottom. I have a word phrase underneath of my title, and I'm adding a 4th word phrase up at the top, connecting the 2 florals at the top. Now, I went for this little rainbow piece because I knew it wouldn't stand out very much on the rainbow paper, and that's what I was looking for, something subtle to fill in that space so it wasn't just a gap. I'm not a huge fan of leaving big gaps in the corners and where things connect. I tend to fill in my embellishment in those areas. I pulled that off of the 6x12 sticker sheet, and now I am going to switch to the chipboard, and I think the only thing I ended up pulling off of there was a button. I'm pretty sure. I considered this little word phrase here, but didn't love the way that it fit underneath of this title. It would work really nicely under a different title, but this title had a pretty simple baseline there at the bottom of the letters, and so a straight across little subtitle worked best. I ended up just pulling in this little button, which is just a nice little not papery element that I can include on the page. I'm going to bring in my T-square ruler. If you don't have a T-square ruler and you do journaling on your layouts, I would highly suggest you get one. They're very, very inexpensive. I don't think I paid more than a couple of dollars for it, but if you can find them at someplace like Walmart or somewhere like Target, someplace that has stationery supplies, they may be cheaper. I just got mine from Amazon, and I think it was a couple of dollars, but it works. It does a great job for making nice straight lines, and I really like it for journaling. I do really like it for journaling. Now, coming in with my same Muji pen, which is M-U-J-I, I believe. It is a gel pen, and I find it works brilliantly for journaling and for outlining. So I'm outlining both of my layers of paper behind my photos, which gives them a little bit of a shadow and the impression of depth and dimension behind those papers, and just kind of helps them pop off the page, kind of a 3D effect, if you will, and gives them the appearance of standing up a little bit, of the appearance of that dimension without actually having things that take up a lot of time and space on my layouts. Now, doing a bit of scattering with some smaller detail pieces. These are the little puffy hearts and circles that come with this collection, and I'm tucking in these circles onto the centers of those florals and then adding little hearts around my clusters. Really, really like those. They're quite pretty. These, on the other hand, are some teeny tiny little florals that I fussy cut from one of the papers, and it was a 12x12 paper full of butterflies, and then it had these teeny tiny little florals around the outsides of the butterflies. And how I fussy cut these out, had a few people ask, how did I fussy cut out these teeny tiny little florals? 2 tips. 1, I held on to the butterflies and cut the florals first, so I actually had a pretty good sized piece of paper to hold on to while I was cutting these tiny florals. And secondly, I left a small, very thin white border around the outside of these florals. That way I wouldn't cut into the color, trying to fussy cut such a tiny shape. It worked out beautifully, and they are the perfect little scattering pieces to add around my clusters, especially if I'm playing with florals. Finishing off with some splattering, because scattering and splattering is always how I finish off my layout to add a little bit of detail work. I do a controlled splatter with Nuvo drops in gold, and then I come in with some Heidi Swapp Color Shine in gold that also splatter around the outside. And I really like how this turns out on the darker blues to the right. It's just a really fun effect. Be sure to check out the blog for more photos. That is cocoavanilla.com.au. Until next time, bye y'all.